Nightmares. The other night, 2 nights ago, I was up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. I'd had two very terrifying nightmares. One, probably the most extraordinarily terrifying of my life. And I couldn't sleep. I was up and I sent out a tweet in the middle of the night, and Anthony and Molly both were up, I guess, and Anthony, of course, being in another time zone, and even mentioned, they sent out tweets, well, what are you doing up? And Anthony said I was restless, and yesterday at work I was talking to Molly, and I told him, Molly, I had a, disturbing event. I was up in the middle of the night. I said, that tweet I sent, I was up because I was having really bad nightmares. I had 2 bad nightmares. And I told him, I said, maybe someone's trying to tell me something, given, all my recent, the topic of my recent videos. And I decided to look into it a little bit. And Molly said, yeah, you ought to make a video about that. And I thought about it a little bit, and I decided I will. So I decided to look into it. Here's how things can work. There were 2 options at that point. When I realized that I was, I'm having these nightmares, and when I realized that there was I thought maybe there's a connection between what I'm saying and these events. And so I decided to take a more scientific approach and to begin to look into it. So I did a little research on nightmares, and I discovered some interesting things. I discovered that, first of all, I got some facts. Fact 1 is that about 70% of dream content has a negative element to it. That was interesting. Fact 2 was that children have a lot of nightmares, but adults tend to have a nightmare that they can remember, an average of about once a month. Now, I don't remember my dreams. I can almost say as a rule, this type of event was very exceptional, and I can't remember the last nightmare I've ever had, except for out of childhood, perhaps. So for me, I haven't. This was an exceptional event. So there were 2 facts there. 70%, as I said, are negative content, average about once a month. And the other thing was that it said that as for causes, there were, although in some cases, they were not completely sure, but there were a number of different things, everything from diet to sleeping posture. And the one that really got my attention was when it said fearful experiences during the day that can lead to a nightmare at night. So if you have something fearful happening to you during your waking hours, it might then reflect it in your sleeping hours. Now, I started thinking back, what had happened the previous day, and nothing happened. I had really no fearful event happen. But then I started thinking a little further back to the day before that. And the day before, I had a phone call with someone very close to me, and that person had told me a piece of information that at the time I had taken in and not really realized the significance of it. But in the following 24 hours, I began to understand how weighty that what's happening is. And I won't go into details. It's kind of private. But what is basically happening is that something's happening in this person's life. This person is very important to me, and if nothing is done about it, they are going to be in a pretty desperate situation, maybe even in a dangerous situation. And I'm realizing, it took me about 24 hours to begin to realize that I'm one of the persons, probably the main person, whose job it will be to solve this problem. And if I don't solve this problem, pretty bad things can happen. I'll get some better light there. Now, that phone call happened the day before the nightmare. And as I mentioned, it didn't occur to me until afterwards, when I was thinking about it within the following 24 hours, just how significant this problem was, and how actually this person could be in a dangerous situation. And I was actually pretty anxious about that. The day before the dream, I was pretty anxious, thinking about what would happen and trying to trouble myself over how I'm possibly going to solve this problem, and make this better. So there, I have an observation and some evidence towards an explanation. The observation, the nightmares, and the evidence being that nightmares are a common element of adult life, and I had a direct antecedent event to give rise to the possible reason to it as an explanation for the nightmares that night. And now, looking at that, then I was then comforted. I was basically said, well, look, it looks like looking at the evidence here, I have not only an understanding of roughly how these nightmares occur, but I have a direct explanation for why that might have happened to me on this night. So then I have two choices to make. Am I going to basically accept the weight of the evidence that's been put for me, that this is basically just a function of a result of what's happening in my life, the happenstance in my life, reflected in my nighttime musings? Or am I going to select instead that I'm being sent a message from beyond in response to my choice to become more vocal on the topic of theism and lack of belief? Well, of those two, I'm going to select the first. Why would I do that? Why would I dismiss the one about that this might be a message? Because that basically is making a decision outside the sphere of evidence. Now that comes to the topic of what Carl Sagan calls crummy evidence. You can make decisions in life based on crummy evidence, and it really is an unhealthy and non-productive thing. It's like similar to if I was to go ahead and proceed with the idea that the message is being sent to me from beyond, that would be similar to when I comfort my daughter when she was small, and she would tell me there was a monster in the closet, in the dark there, and I would turn on the light and look through the closet and open the doors and move the clothes and show her indeed there were no monsters in there. She had the direct empirical evidence that there were no monsters in there, but nevertheless I turned the light off and she calls me 5 minutes later complaining that there's still monsters in the closet. Sure, she is persisting in a belief that is basically not founded on any evidence. Now that is an understandable proposition from the juvenile mind, and I do not wish to proceed at this stage in my life under such an operating principle. I would much rather take the evidence at hand, take an observation, look into it, try to learn about it, try to understand what might be happening, look for any evidence of what may be happening to cause this, and if I find it, then accept that as the cause, leaving my mind open for a greater to a change in observation should more evidence present itself. So I hope that that helps to illustrate how basically you can apply a scientific principle to the scientific methodology to even an experience so strange as a nightmare. Well, I'll leave you guys at that. Hope all of you have a wonderful day and a day without any nightmares. And if they do happen, give a little thought to what may be going on in your life. Maybe you'll find the answer. Take care.